So hello, everyone. My name is Haley Clark, and I am a PhD student in the Faculty of Education. And Alita is not up here, but she's in the crowd. And Sunita has also worked with me on this kind of project. So I was an intern through the Faculty of Education with the physical therapy program last summer, where we worked on this and then was implemented into the fall. What's working? So what is mentorship? Most folks will kind of know a general kind of definition of mentorship. Usually you have somebody who's experienced in the profession or the field, and then you have somebody who's maybe more novice or new in the field, and they're working together for that personal and professional growth. But one of the key aspects that they talk about with mentorship is this idea of a critical friend. So it doesn't always have to be somebody that's formally in your environment, or maybe you've been assigned. It can also be somebody that has just really supported you throughout your career development, your professional development. Usually involves a certain level of guidance through certain activities or certain aspects of your profession. The benefits of mentorship are usually, pretty high, and we see a lot of mentorship programs that have different benefits. So if you're going to more of a professional capacity, you'll see more of this increased confidence, usually competency in the desired tasks or professional standards. You'll also see increased communication in those professional environments. So you see people are learning to work with each other, maybe in ways that they didn't know how to before. Growth and learning, it usually reduces stress in the workplace. That's in the workplace literature. And then in education, we've actually doing some research in the Faculty of Ed on well-being. So mentoring for well-being in educational spaces, whether that's for educators or it's for the students themselves as well. So we see mentorship programs at Queen's, as you know as well. So one of the things that we were thinking about when developing a mentorship program is how do we make sure that it's actually meeting the goals that it is set out to do? And this is in the physical therapy program. So thinking about it taking a curricular approach. So if most people in here have probably heard curricular approaches or have designed a course in some way, shape, or form. So thinking about what are the goals, what do you want the outcomes to be, and how are we going to get there? And in the mentorship space, this is usually through formal mentorship. So you've been assigned somebody and you're working with them on a consistent basis. So it's not something informally, we meet at a coffee shop, we just chat about, what's going on in life. It's usually more formal. So this has seen usually pretty good results in terms of professional and academic settings, in terms of workplace settings, in having this facilitated learning, this growth, this kind of development, increased satisfaction in the workplace, and increasing knowledge, especially as you can see in clinical psychology programs. There was a study that was done on increasing the capacity and reducing some of those burnout rates that we're seeing, especially in the education system right now. So implementing the program. So the physical therapy program was thinking about how do we meet these different competencies? And we kind of worked together to think about what was realistic to do in a mentorship program and what was more suited maybe for those academic kind of traditional course development approaches. And thinking about the National Physiotherapy Advisory Committee puts out these competencies and what graduates are kind of supposed to meet at the end of their program, and thinking about different ways that they can actually be built into a mentorship style relationship. So then this developed into a curricular approach. So the domains that we were looking at is scholarship, which was mainly contribute to the learning of others. That can sometimes be particularly challenging in a traditional classroom setting if you're working one-on-one or if we're all working together. So how would you contribute to the learning of others? Taking those leadership skills, teaching others maybe what you already learned and demonstrating that in ways that's not through maybe traditional assessments. Then the leadership is also within those health systems and in the profession. So thinking about how these individuals are going to go into the workforce in a year or two, and how they're going to interact with their peers and potentially build their leadership capacity prior to graduating from the program. They're seeing a lot less people that want to be in those leadership positions. So thinking about how we can kind of instill that and build that throughout. So how this program worked was there was assignments for the second year physical therapy students, and they also had a guided weekly discussions with their mentee. Now the mentees did not have this attached to a course, so that's maybe something in the future that we'll discuss about adding. But at this point, the mentees were involved, for their professional development and their personal learning. But the mentors actually received a grade at the end based on what they submitted from weekly assignments and discussions. No, not every discussion that they had to be recorded or anything like that. It's just something to kind of keep track and keep them, making sure that they're still meeting and they're meeting some of those, again, competencies that were discussed. So this is a lot of writing on a slide, and it definitely looks a little bit crowded in there, but these were kind of how we came up with, this is kind of the curricular approach that we were talking about here is, the learning needs of peers and how they can do that. And we actually divided this up and went, okay, an assessment that we can evaluate that using some of the tools that Queen's already has, the wraparound worksheet. And then the activities were more about them working through it with their mentee. And that was developing more of that reciprocal relationship. So the activities were not always this mentorship model that used to exist, that we're just bestowing knowledge onto you as the mentor, onto the mentee. It's actually more reciprocal of, hey, maybe what are these tips and tricks that you have found helpful? Hey, let's share back and forth. So again, going through that approach, different activities, and then having those assessments. So again, the deal model, kind of keeping track of the students throughout the term. So then to the actual, data that we got out of this. So there was an online anonymous survey based on, the principles of program evaluation. So looking at what was our curricular approach, what did we want to meet in our goals, and did we achieve those? And asking the students themselves, not thinking about from the instructor point of view or our point of view, did we meet those? So there was 22 responses to the survey for the mentors, so that's over 80% completion, and then the mentees, so some mentors and mentees, we had double based on the program, but it was actually a higher threshold for the mentees, and they had only quantitative responses. So here are some of the results, lovely highlighted, so you can't miss them. So we kind of evaluated these different aspects. So the mentee, you can see it's all within like an agree to strongly agree. We were trying to evaluate if our matching went well, we used a model and that sort of thing, but did that go well? Personality fit, the weekly activities, were they beneficial? Personal and professional growth. So theirs was a lot shorter. They had a lot less, kind of buy-in because it wasn't related to a course, and they were more receiving feedback. Where the mentors, again, on this side, we have a lot on the agree to strongly agree kind of aspects here. So their collaboration aspects, if they were able to contribute to the education, if they felt like they were contributing to the education of others, and then also allowing them to have those critical conversations with each other. So they did really good in terms of, kind of the fit and feeling like they're contributed and active participants. Where this started to fall short a little more, again, the yellow shows you greatly, is the weekly activities. So that was more the assessments that they were going through and the activities that they were potentially doing. Now, this is something that is also rooted in the literature, that sometimes formalized programs have more trouble with these aspects. People like to have informal mentorship where they don't particularly like to have all these guides, or they have to submit something at the end of the day. It kind of, it ruins the relationship kind of thing. So that's something that we're thinking about with the development in the future of the program, is how we can reshape those activities to reflect students' perspectives on those. But again, we did a good job in terms of building those supportive relationships, potentially those continued relationships as well, and having those personality fits were relatively high for both the mentee and the mentor. So again, the professional and personal benefits improved, self-reflection and communication, your transfer of knowledges and experiences. A lot of people felt like that was confidence building, and transferring knowledge to somebody else really made them feel like they were grateful for that opportunity. Relationship building, and again, developing that critical friend that you could go to and talk to in different situations. Logistical barriers, obviously, to the program is sometimes administrative support and continuing, scheduling difficulties. People wanted maybe more organic relationships than assigned relationships, and mentees not having a course related to it. Sometimes they didn't engage as thoroughly. So again, areas of improvement, more organic, maybe less structured, less scripted, to kind of think about how they can develop relationships without always having a script in front of them, or thinking about an assessment that they have to do after that meeting or after that relationship, and more in-person opportunities for sure. And I'm seeing that my time is over. Just 3 takeaways is that they can be beneficial. Really noting that those clinical health graduate student programs, that mentorship can be used in these ways, that they can be a critical part in skill development as well. And again, that ongoing collaboration and leadership that they're learning from these opportunities can take them into their career and really develop throughout. Ta-da!
Okay, we know it's later in the day, but someone's got to have a question.
I don't blame you if you don't. There we go, yeah.
Thanks. Thanks so much for your presentation. It's very interesting. So you mentioned this was the pilot of running this program. You also mentioned you provided a lot of guidance or structure for these weekly activities. And I wonder, did you provide any skills-based training in advance of like launching the program? Because you mentioned maybe some people didn't have the skills to be mentors or to run less structured conversations. Was there any general skill building ahead of time?
Yeah, so they did one session on kind of like what it is to be a mentor and mentorship, and that was mainly, you know, derived from the literature and what that kind of looks like. And I think there probably can be more development there of maybe a few sessions or smaller sessions on what does it mean to be a mentor and what can you also get from the mentee, so to ensure that that relationship is reciprocal, and also more training for the mentee in what that relationship is going to look like, because they didn't really get a ton of preface on what, since it was a pilot. So knowing how to engage in those relationships just to kind of continue that relationship past and developing those skills. They did some, you know, self-reflection on their skills, but they didn't get that skill development beforehand. Thank you.
I was curious if there are any instances where there are difficulties in communication between mentor and mentee, and if there were something, how did you navigate those?
Yeah, so there was definitely at least one I can think of that they had difficulty, especially with the mentees not being formally enrolled in a course that was related to their grades. So obviously with the mentors, they're worried about their grade and passing that class, so they're going to engage a little bit more. But usually the mentor just went to the person who was teaching that course, which was a professor, and said, hey, I'm not getting a hold of my mentee, like what do I do? And they were able to follow up. Obviously a mentor, you know, a colleague reaching out and saying, hey, I haven't heard from you, is a lot different from a professor reaching out and saying, hey, I haven't heard from you. And they were usually able to kind of engage. But I think potentially having it both, that the mentor and the mentee are somehow enrolled in a course, to have that buy-in would be helpful in the future to ensure that there's the same level of kind of mutual respect there too.
Last question.
Thank you for this. It's super interesting. I apologize if I missed this detail, but I noticed you had some questions around the personality match between the mentor and the mentee. I just wondered how you'd assessed that, like whether there was some kind of, how you matched them up.
Yeah, we did. I definitely was, I was like, oh, it was a long process, so I didn't know if I'd get it all in 10 minutes. But we used some of the literature that had said, you know, about what were people's goals overall in the program, what were people's backgrounds, what were people's, you know, kind of career aspirations, what they did their undergrad degree in. There was kind of a list of questions like that, so then they were aligning, and we matched them based on their kind of, their ability to kind of line up there. So some of it was, you know, like what how would you describe yourself? You know, you say your personality traits, and it's like, what would you look for in a mentee or mentor? And then we tried to match that up to ensure that they were kind of along the same lines. So there were some people that they were like, oh, I'm really outgoing and I want a mentor that's also really outgoing. And then there were some people, I'm more reserved, so I'm gonna need a mentor that's more outgoing because I'm gonna be quiet. So kind of going off that, and it seems the process that we did was relatively successful, and just continuing kind of those aspects. But if you have any questions, I can send you the survey that we had sent out prior. Oh, the door is getting fixed.